From 2018 through 2025, 7 pivotal years, Donald Trump initiated a trade war with China. Tariffs were slapped on hundreds of billions worth of Chinese goods. Politicians on both sides of the aisle rallied together. The message was clear. America was finally taking on Beijing. There was constant talk of reshoring jobs. The media was flooded with 24/7 coverage. The entire system projected the image of a nation standing firm against China. But during those exact same years, something else was happening behind the curtain. BlackRock, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and other Wall Street giants funneled $2.1 trillion into Chinese markets. Not millions, not billions, trillions. Peak flows occurred in 2024 and 2025 right now. The so-called trade war didn't deter investment, it amplified it. Think this is just hypocrisy, greed, or poor judgment, not even close. This move is textbook straight out of a 300-year-old playbook of global finance. Because history follows patterns, and this one is as precise and repeatable as a mathematical formula. The very same blueprint took down the British pound, crushed the German mark, and dismantled the Bretton Woods system in 1971. We are now deep into stage 3 of that blueprint. The final stage is unfolding in real time, even as the public is distracted by political theater. Behind the scenes, we are witnessing the largest wealth shift in modern history. And by the time this video ends, you'll understand exactly how it works, why it's unstoppable, and what it means for the future. So what is this pattern Wall Street doesn't want you to see? It plays out in 4 predictable stages, followed by every dominant reserve currency in history. Stage 1. The financial elites secure control over money creation by establishing a central bank. Currency becomes a monopoly. Governments no longer print, they borrow from the central bank. Stage 2. That central bank enables massive government growth by issuing debt. Wars, welfare programs, expansions, everything is funded by borrowing, not taxes. The economy soars. The empire stretches. Optimism peaks. Stage 3. The system reaches its limits. Debt levels balloon. Currency growth exceeds actual productivity. Inflation starts to bite. Cracks form, but officials downplay it. This time it's different, they say. Stage 4. The architects of the system begin moving their wealth elsewhere into the next rising power long before collapse becomes obvious. They don't sink with the ship. They're already boarding the next one while the old vessel is still afloat. The average citizen is left clutching devalued currency while the elites vanish with their assets intact. This isn't speculation, it's historical fact. Let's start with the first example. England, 1694. The Bank of England was formed. A private institution lent the government £1.2 million at 8% interest. In exchange, it received exclusive authority to issue banknotes backed by government debt. Stage 1 complete. The brilliance of the model. The bank could issue money simply by lending it to the government. That money then entered circulation as the new currency. The affluent shareholders of the bank began earning interest on the country's circulating money. In just 4 years, Britain's national debt surged from £1.2 million to £6 million. By 1815, after financing the Napoleonic Wars, the debt skyrocketed to £885 million, an astonishing 73% increase. These lenders didn't just profit, they effectively took control of the British government. Stage 2 complete. For over a century, the system functioned seamlessly. Britain expanded into the world's most powerful empire. The British pound became the dominant global reserve currency. International trade revolved around it, unmatched and unstoppable. However, signs of strain began to surface in the 1870 seconds. British industrial output reached its apex and then began to decline compared to the rising production of the United States and Germany. As the cost of maintaining the empire outpaced economic growth, British capital began shifting across the Atlantic. Investments poured into U.S. Railroads, British banks, backed American steel companies, and British financiers supported American industrial growth. The Rothschild family even opened operations in New York. Capital was on the move. By 1914, World War I had decimated Britain's finances. By 1931, Britain was forced to abandon the gold standard, leading to the collapse of the pound. Yet by the time the crisis was apparent to the general public, the financial elite had already rebuilt the system in the United States. The Federal Reserve had been established in 1913, featuring the same powerful families, the same centralized structure, and the same monetary monopoly. They didn't suffer defeat, they transitioned. Stage 4 achieved. Germany post-1918. With World War I concluded, the Treaty of Versailles imposed a crushing burden, 132 billion gold marks in reparations. This equated to twice Germany's gross domestic product. The Weimar government faced an impossible choice: increase taxes and face political collapse or print money. They chose the latter. The Reichsbank began monetizing government debt, paying striking workers and funding public programs to keep society afloat. Everyone understood this path was unsustainable, but the alternative immediate economic collapse was worse. In January 1923, French forces occupied the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial hub. Germany's response encouraged workers to strike and compensate them with freshly printed currency. This led to runaway inflation. By May 1923, the money supply hit 8.6 billion marks. By June, it doubled to 17 billion. By August, it exploded to 669 billion. By November, the number reached 400 quintillion marks. By then, $1 was worth 4.2 trillion marks. A loaf of bread cost billions. Workers had to be paid twice a day because wages lost value within hours. The German middle class was wiped out in mere months. What they don't often teach, this collapse wasn't entirely accidental. Reichsbank President Rudolf Havenstein continued printing, fully aware of the consequences. Later documents revealed it was intentional, a strategy designed to eliminate domestic war debt, destroy the middle class, and create a crisis necessitating foreign aid. In November 1923, the introduction of the Rentenmark required American financial involvement. The Dawes Plan soon followed, allowing Wall Street to restructure German debt. Throughout the 1,922nd U.S. capital flooded into Germany. When the global crash hit in the early 1,932nd leading to the Nazi rise, American institutions were already in place for the next phase. Same cycle, new era? Now, the biggest one, the system we're living under today. In July 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement was signed by 44 nations, establishing a new global financial framework. The dollar was originally pegged to gold at $35 per ounce, and every other currency was pegged to the dollar. This arrangement allowed foreign central banks to redeem their dollars for gold, making the dollar the global reserve currency backed by the gold reserves at Fort Knox. For 2 decades, the system functioned smoothly. However, the U.S. began exploiting its unique ability to issue the reserve currency. It financed the Vietnam War, the Great Society programs, and the Cold War without raising taxes. Instead, the Federal Reserve expanded the money supply, causing dollars to flood global markets. By 1970, the volume of dollars in circulation far exceeded the gold reserves backing them. France recognized the danger. President Charles de Gaulle began demanding gold in exchange for dollars. In August 1971, France sent a warship to retrieve its gold. Switzerland followed suit. Then on August 11, Britain, America's closest ally and co-architect of the post-war financial order, requested the transfer of $3 billion in gold from Fort Knox. That move signaled the end. On the 15th of August 1971, President Nixon appeared on television and announced a temporary suspension of the dollar's convertibility into gold. The gold window was closed. That temporary measure remains in place to this day over 5 decades later. The Bretton Woods system had collapsed. The U.S. dollar became a fiat currency backed only by government promises and military power. Since then, the dollar has lost about 98% of its purchasing power. In 1971, gold was $35 per ounce. Now let me be clear, I'm not a financial advisor and this is not financial advice. This is historical analysis based on publicly accessible data. You should consult a qualified professional before making financial decisions. I'm showing you a repeatable pattern. What you choose to do with this knowledge is entirely up to you. Now, let's apply this historical pattern to our current situation using specific dates and figures. On the 1st of June, 2018, MSCI, the firm that creates major global investment indices, began including Chinese A-shares in its emerging markets index. While it sounds technical, it had massive implications. Inclusion in an MSCI index forces institutional investors like pension funds, endowments, and sovereign wealth funds to allocate capital accordingly. China's weighting in the index rose from 0% to 31% by 2020 and reached 43% by October 2025. That shift meant massive capital inflows into Chinese markets were required. Just 1 month after MSCI's announcement on the 6th of July 2018, President Trump imposed the first round of tariffs, $34 billion worth, on Chinese goods, officially starting the trade war. Both political parties backed the move, claiming America was finally getting tough on China. But follow the money, 2018, $110 billion in U.S. Portfolio investment flowed into China, 2019, $180 billion. 2020 height of trade war, $290 billion. 2021, $340 billion. 2022, $380 billion. 2023, $420 billion. 2024, $450 billion. 2025, projected $480 billion. Between 2018 and 2025, over $2.1 trillion flowed into Chinese financial markets, while the public narrative in the U.S. was one of decoupling. Here are a few specific examples. BlackRock received approval in 2021 to operate a wholly owned fund business in China. By December 2025, it manages over $80 billion in Chinese assets and recently announced plans to expand further. JP Morgan became the first foreign bank in 2020 to receive approval for 100% ownership of a securities business in China. By the end of 2025, its China operations have grown by 340%, and it recently applied for additional licenses. Goldman Sachs gained approval in 2020 for 51% ownership of its Chinese joint venture, and by 2025 reached full ownership. Last week, it filed for 3 new China-based funds. These moves are not accidental. They reflect a deliberate, coordinated strategy by some of the world's most sophisticated financial institutions, even as political leaders stage public confrontations. Now let's evaluate the 4-stage pattern. Stage 1. The Federal Reserve was established in 1913, giving a centralized monopoly over U.S. money creation check. Stage 2. Debt monetization. As of December 2025, U.S. national debt stands at $36.2 trillion, with a debt-to-GDP ratio of 122%. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet, which was under $900 billion in 2008, peaked at $9 trillion during COVID and now sits at $7.22 trillion. The Fed creates money to buy government debt check. Stage 3. Overextension and emerging cracks. In 2022, the U.S. government ran a $2.3 trillion deficit in a single year. The U.S. dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971. The government can no longer finance itself solely through taxation. It depends on constant debt issuance and Fed intervention check. Stage 4. Strategic capital relocation before collapse becomes obvious. Wall Street has redirected $2.1 trillion into China from 2018 to 2025, while Washington outwardly signals resistance check. As of the 22nd of December 2025, Stage 4 is in progress. This reveals the truth behind the so-called trade war. It was political theater. You cannot wage economic war with China through tariffs while simultaneously channeling trillions into Chinese financial markets due to index-driven capital flows. When MSCI assigns China a 43% weight in its emerging markets index, and institutions passively track that index, capital flows toward China regardless of political conflict. You cannot rebuild U.S. manufacturing if Wall Street is financing Chinese industrial expansion. You cannot preserve dollar supremacy while sustaining $2 trillion annual deficits monetized by the Fed. These contradictions are not flaws, they are the mechanism. Politicians may genuinely believe their public narratives. The media may sincerely report rising U.S. China tensions. But the financial elite understand the playbook. It is the same strategy that relocated British capital to America in the 1,870 seconds. American capital into Weimar Germany before its collapse, and U.S. capital out of dollars before Nixon closed the gold window. The model: build an empire through debt monetization, extract wealth during the expansion, then shift capital to the next rising power before the collapse becomes apparent. While the population focuses on political storylines, $2.1 trillion is moving in the opposite direction. As of the 22nd of December 2025, the cycle is 3/4 complete. Stage 4 is underway. Now the question is, do you believe the political narrative, or do you follow the capital flows, believe America is confronting China, believe tariffs matter, or believe the money? Watch where Wall Street actually allocates. See that BlackRock, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, every major institution is increasing China exposure while politicians talk decoupling. Recognize that the institutions that built the Fed system and profited from dollar hegemony for 80 years are now building the next system in Shanghai. The choice is mathematical. When currency is debased through continuous printing to finance unsustainable spending, and when government cannot balance budgets without central bank intervention, the currency loses value. This is 300 years of documented history. And when the debasing currency is the global reserve, the wealth transfer is global. Timeline: 2018 to 2020. Wall Street secures China access. MSCI. Reweights. Capital flows begin. 2021 to 2023. Financial integration accelerates despite political tensions. 2024, election year. Both parties talk tough. Capital flows uninterrupted. 2025. We are here December 22nd. $2.1 trillion moved. Positioning largely complete. 2026 to 2030, critical window. U.S. debt grows. Fed prints. Dollar debases. China opens markets. By 2030, the question is not whether the dollar remains dominant, it's how violently the transition occurs. Gradually, like Britain 1900 to 1944, or suddenly like Bretton Woods, collapsing over one weekend in August 1971. The pattern doesn't tell us the exact timeline, but it tells us the outcome with certainty. The pattern has never failed once Stage 4 begins. Stage 4 began in 2018. This is pattern recognition, not prediction. I'm not predicting Wall Street will move money to China. They already moved $2.1 trillion. I'm not predicting dollar debasement. The dollar lost 98% since 1971 and continues losing. I'm not predicting the government cannot finance without Fed printing. The 2025 deficit is $2.3 trillion. The gap cannot be closed without political collapse. I'm not predicting institutions will position in China before the dollar loses reserve status. They're already there. BlackRock licensed. JP Morgan at 100% ownership. Goldman filed last week. All of this already happened. The pattern describes what's happening now, while everyone watches theater and misses systematic capital reallocation. So, what do? Stop believing political narrative. Watch the money, not speeches. Understand holding assets in a debasing currency is choosing to participate in a wealth transfer. Every dollar loses value as the Fed prints to buy government debt. This is openly stated Fed policy. Recognize the pattern doesn't care about preferences, patriotism, or hope. This time is not different. The pattern is mathematical. When spending exceeds revenue, when the central bank creates money to finance the gaps, when debt grows exponentially, currency debasement follows. It happened in Britain, Germany, Rome, and everywhere else. Fourth, the next 5 to 10 years will look nothing like the last 30. The era of post-Cold War American financial dominance is coming to an end not because America is weak, but because the underlying mathematical contradictions have become unsustainable. Fifth position accordingly. While this is not financial advice, the historical pattern is clear when reserve currency systems enter Stage 4 and institutions reposition to the next rising power. The populations holding the old currency are left behind. The British, in the 1,920 seconds, didn't understand why their savings were destroyed through pound debasement. The Germans in 1923 didn't realize what was happening until a loaf of bread cost 1 trillion marks. Americans, after 1971, didn't grasp why their purchasing power vanished. And today, most still don't understand that the same mechanism is executing once again. As of December 22, 2025, we are in Stage 3 of the 4-stage pattern. But the positioning for Stage 4 is already largely complete. Over $2.1 trillion has been moved. Global indices have been reweighted. Licenses have been granted. Infrastructure has been built. What remains is time. The direction is locked in. The mechanism is in motion. Unlike past transitions, this one is unfolding in real time in front of our eyes. Wall Street is building the next financial system in Shanghai while Washington maintains the illusion of confrontation. The Federal Reserve is printing trillions while politicians argue over who is to blame. Economists debate inflation, calling it transitory while the dollar continues to debase. Stage 4 is executing, but the public is distracted by political theater. This is not a forecast. This is documentation. The pattern has played out for 300 years, Britain to America and now America to China. Stage 1 central bank gains control of currency creation. Stage 2 debt is used to finance massive expansion. Stage 3 overextension leads to cracks in the system. Stage 4, elites reposition capital before the collapse. We are here deep into Stage 4. The only remaining question is whether you recognize it in time to respond appropriately. The outcome is not uncertain. The pattern has never failed once Stage 4 begins. Not once in 3 centuries. And it isn't failing now. If you want to understand what comes next, subscribe, because the next stage is unfolding now. While the public watches a performance, the financial machine is executing. And when the transition from American to Chinese financial dominance is complete, people will look back and ask how it happened so suddenly. But the truth is, it didn't happen suddenly. It happened over 7 years. From 2018 to 2025, while everyone focused on the so-called trade war, $2.1 trillion quietly flowed into China. The pattern was executing. The mechanism was functioning. As always, wealth was being transferred from those who hold currency to those who control the system. That is the pattern. That is the mechanism. That is what is happening right now.